Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. In today's episode, we are talking about divorce. There is still a stigma around divorce. You may be viewed as a failure, you may view yourself as a failure, and divorce can be traumatic. Depending who initiated the process, it can come as a shock to the other party. It's always emotional, and both men and women feel a sense of loss. While no two divorces are alike, there are still some common reasons for it. Can you see it as an opportunity to grow rather than an ending of something? My guest, Elizabeth Cohen, who has gone through a divorce herself, has a refreshing approach. Dr. Cohen is a licensed clinical psychologist who received her PhD from Boston University. As part of her graduate training, she treated clients at the world-renowned Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders in Boston, Massachusetts. Dr. Cohen was the recipient of the prestigious American Psychological Foundation Research Award. After completing her postdoctorate training at Bellevue Hospital Center and New York University, she was asked to become the director of the CBT program at Bellevue's outpatient psychiatric clinic. Dr. Cohen is the director of Dr. Elizabeth Cohen and Associates, a group practice providing comprehensive, holistic cognitive behavioral therapeutic services in New York City. Dr. Cohen has an online program called Afterglow, the light at the other side of divorce. This program, in my understanding, opens up a couple of times a year, and if you're interested, you can join her mailing list or connect with her on social media to keep up to date. Dr. Cohen has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, NBC News, Women's Health, HuffPost, Thrive Global, and Good Housekeeping. If you are listening in real time, on May 20th, Dr. Cohen will be conducting a 14-day challenge on how to make good decisions while going through the process of divorce. When you're going through divorce, you are not only dealing with the emotional aspect of it, but you're also making important decisions. What if you had the perfect tool to make the best decisions during your divorce? Dr. Cohen has created a step-by-step guide to making the best decisions during your divorce. I'll have a link in the show notes for you to download that guide. And if you join her during the 14-day challenge, by the end, you will have confidence, security, and optimism wherever you need to make a decision related to your divorce. To learn more, visit drelizabethcohen.com. For full episode show notes, additional free resources on parenting, contact info, and ways to work with me, visit authenticparenting.com. As a listener of the show, you receive a 10% discount on all my coaching packages. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you feel compelled to rate and write a review, that would be appreciated. And now, please enjoy this important conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. So we are talking about divorce, a very difficult topic, and I am hoping you will give us some insightful answers and hope. So there is a lot of stigma around divorce, correct?
Yes, there is a lot of stigma around divorce. One of my main goals in my work is to stop the stigma. I do believe it's because it started in a time when there was a reaction to women in particular leaving men, that being seen as a violation of this covenant that I think the patriarchy, meaning kind of the overarching hierarchical order, did not approve of. And we still, believe it or not, still to this day, I have clients in my office who refer to people who have divorced parents as being from a broken home. It's wild. Still to this day.
It's true. So am I understanding you correctly? You're trying to also debunk that myth that if you're divorced, you're not broken or your family is not broken.
Absolutely. In fact, the work that I do helps encourage women and men to see that being divorced actually can be an opportunity to learn about yourself deeper, to grow more confidence, to grow more security, and to grow more optimism. That the next chapter of your life does not have to be the ending or a decrease in your happiness from before. It can possibly be better. I joke sometimes that I think that divorce can be graduate school for yourself and for relationship training, that you can really, if you decide to look at it as an opportunity to grow, you can learn so much about yourself and how you relate to others.
But not all divorces are the same.
Nope.
There are a lot of divorces that are similar. Of course, every family is different. Every story, every couple, every relationship is different. Why do people get divorced in the first place? I'm sure, this is like a large question and a question that doesn't have answers perhaps, but what do you see, what kind of trends do you see in your practice, in the work you do with women online?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what I notice in my practice is that the key issue in divorce is a lack of communication. And this can be a lack of verbal communication, as seen in feeling like your partner isn't asking what's going on with you, or interested in what you're pursuing, or curious about your job, or you're curious about how you're raising your kids. Or it could be physical communication, where you feel like your partner is not interested in touching you or being intimate with you, or even spending time with you, where you might notice they're out a lot or always on their computer. So there's a lack of communication and connection that we know in divorce, divorces don't happen overnight. There's usually a long time of kind of this slow erosion of communication. So as someone who works with couples post-divorce, but also before divorce, there is a type of intervention you can do to help bring yourself closer in communication, but it takes a lot of work. So if you've had a long extended period of time of disconnect or difficulty communicating, that is going to build up over time. And that's often what ends up happening when you decide to divorce. You feel like you simply cannot communicate again.
You said divorce doesn't happen overnight, and I agree with that, even though it appears sometimes like that. I predominantly work with men, and oftentimes they would say, we were sleeping in the same bed last night, or the night before. She woke up and she said, I want a divorce. And they say everything seemed fine. But then other stuff obviously surfaces, or they discover some other reasons. But it seems like it comes as a shock when someone files for divorce, the initiator usually, right? For the other party, it seems like it came from nowhere, from out of left field. Right?
That's such a good point. I'm glad you bring that up, because you're right. As a therapist, I see always kind of what's under the iceberg. So I see the struggles all along, but you're absolutely right that for at least one person in the relationship often does feel shocked, because even if they knew that there was trouble in communicating, there was trouble connecting, they might not have known that their partner was actually considering ending the relationship. So that's the part that can really feel, and that's a good distinction, that can really feel like a shock, which is that, oh, I guess we're not working on this anymore. You've decided it's over. And that can be a real shock to the system. And that shock can be what we call a shock trauma. Similarly to what happens when you get in a car accident, where you're driving along thinking everything's okay, and then suddenly something happens. That's what it can feel like for some people who are getting divorced. And the sad part for people who are in that position is that you need time to process the shock. But often we don't get that, because suddenly we're served papers, or we have to find an apartment, or we have to talk to the kids. It's the kind of an overwhelm of the system, with the shock trauma and then all that needs to be done.
I know, because let's say somebody was married for 15 years, out of a blue, the wife takes the kids and files for divorce, or a man for that matter. It doesn't matter which party. And for the party who was not in the know, it came from nowhere. That party, it's like the world crumbled. The loss is so significant. I had someone recently who said, I almost attempted suicide when my wife left me, because you lose everything, right? Because you put everything into a marriage.
Yeah.
Can you speak about that? What marriage means for us? Why is it so painful, this divorce, when it crumbles, when it doesn't work? Why do we react so painfully, emotionally?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you are asking this question. It's an important question. We are social beings, so we are meant to be in connection with other people. It's an interesting time to be talking about this because when we're recording this, we're all in social isolation. So it goes against our survival instinct to be not disconnected. So the pain of having to end a marriage is really your nervous system responding to a threat of not being in connection, which is part of surviving. Those of us who could have a tribe or people connected to us, and modern day tribe is our marriage, that would protect us from any sort of threat. So when that goes away, we feel very vulnerable. That's the first part. So I would say that's one of the reasons. The other reason that people feel in so much pain when a marriage is over is, and I go into this quite a bit in my online course, is because we have a lot of assumptions that we were taught from family members and also from culture about what marriage and relationships are supposed to look like. We've been taught from beginning of time that marriages are supposed to stay together. So we have this assumption that if somebody leaves us or we leave somebody, then we're a failure. So in my program, I really have people challenge some of those thoughts that divorce is a failure or marriages are meant to be 60 years plus. I really think part of it is biological and the need to connect. And another part is what we're taught from the environment.
And if a person, this is what I see from my practice, if a person, let's say, had other significant losses in their life previously or significant traumas, it sort of reactivates that old wound and people become unreasonable.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's such a good point. I think I was just thinking about this. I can't tell you how many of the people I work with say, my parents were divorced and I promised myself I would never be divorced. Think about the pressure that is putting on you. It's like saying you're going to eat a kind of food for the rest of your life and never be bored with it. Like you just would never put that kind of pressure and saying, I'm never going to get divorced. I'm never going to allow myself to feel like I might need to leave because of what my parents did. And that's an example of the trauma that you went through as a kid based on how your parents handled divorce, which by the way is not how you're handling your divorce. That is the trauma that you need to work on. That is the piece that needs to be addressed because it's not the fear of getting the divorce. It's the fear of feeling like you did when your parents got divorced.
Yes, because if you factually think about it without any emotions, right? Take the emotions out of the couple's divorce process. It's just a fact. Two people no longer can live or coexist together under the same roof. They fight, they argue, whatever the reasons are. And now it's the end of that relationship. And like you said, they're going to find themselves, work on themselves, this whole post-divorce growth and all of that. But unfortunately, it's hard to find yourself in that type of mindset. Yes. That's why I love your message completely. It's very empowering, uplifting, inspiring, very hopeful. And this is why I wanted you to be on the podcast, because I don't want divorce to be such a horrific event in someone's life.
Exactly. And I actually want to share something that I share in my program, which is what if we were to think of divorce as with this understanding. My partner and I have gotten everything we could out of this relationship, and it is now time to let it go.
Mm.
Just notice how that settles in your nervous system in such a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to shame or throw away what had been really good. But now it is time to admit that piece of work, that chapter, has come to an end. And I think with that kind of understanding, you can A, be less angry at the other person, and B, be more hopeful for what's next.
Easier said than done. There's a lot of anger, rage, resentment,
Yes.
Stalking, harassment.
Yes.
There is a lot of temporary restraining orders, final
Yes.
restraining orders being filed, and endless battles in the court system. And sometimes people fight for years and years,
Mm-hmm.
and they become enemies.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Well, fighting is one way of definitely not letting go. So you might not still be married, but if you're fighting with your ex in court or with mediators or through restraining orders or through threats, you're still connected.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes.
So you're just not really, I talk to my clients about this, they just might not really be ready to let go. And that maybe then we work with that. We work with probably a lot of unfelt loss. There's a huge piece of grief and loss that happens during divorce. I don't mean to say that that's not an important and essential part of it. Very often what happens is we jump over the grief and the loss processing and we go right into the anger, and we miss really the healing ability of letting something go.
Yes, completely. Interestingly enough, I don't think I've ever shared this on the podcast. I had a guest on the podcast several years ago who talked about divorce, parenting, co-parenting, a male guest. And maybe several months later, I received an email from someone I didn't know who said that, she was the wife of that guest, ex-wife, and she started bad-mouthing him. How dare he come to your podcast and talk about this? All this bittersweet, resentmentful, angry letter to me. And I thought to myself, wow, they've been divorced for 10 years. He clearly has become a motivational speaker. He has a whole different life. He talks about this on podcasts and things like that. She, however, I was really confused. Why did she write to me? Like, who am I in this process, right? Then I wrote back to her. I didn't want to ignore her message, and in a therapeutic kind of way, validated her feelings and all that. It opened up a conversation, and then several email exchanges later, she said, I'm very sorry. I was just in a bad place, and I don't know why I emailed you, and things like that. But even 10 years later, like contacting someone who is a nobody basically in their relationship and bad-mouthing the ex, I thought that was like, wow, what does this tell us about people's relationships?
Yeah, well, what I think is really indicative of that story actually is how helpful your response was. And actually, all she really wanted was to be heard.
Yes.
Right? And that the motivation of being angry and taking your ex's inventory is simply because we want to be heard. All of us want to be heard, and we used to think that our partners could hear us. And it's a huge loss that they will never, most likely, see our side the way we actually see it.
So divorce this is how I perceive it. And I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
But divorce is actually about the person who is filing for divorce or who is ending the relationship. It's about them trying to find their lost self or their authentic self, or connect to their self, or find a different dimension of their lost self in that relationship. Is it about that person, or is it about the couple or the other party?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, I mean, every situation is its own, but I do think that that old phrase, "it's not you, it's me," really is applicable in divorce. That there's something in the person who's deciding that they want a divorce. There's something that isn't working anymore in the marriage, and they can't see a way out for themselves within it. I don't think, in my experience, that it's often that the other person, unless, of course, it's in a situation where someone is violent or abusive, but it's infrequently that the other person is all at fault. Very often, the person who wants to leave the relationship has tried many, many times and many ways to make it work. You have to remember, when your partner comes to you and says they want a divorce, while it might feel like a shock to you, it's very likely that they have tried for a long time to make it work. Because nobody really wants to do all the damage that comes from a divorce, with kids, with a home, with money. I mean, it's a big deal. People don't jump into it. So it's likely that the person has really tried to make it work and just now no longer feels like they can for themselves. But not because the other person is a problem, but because it just won't work for them. And that's so hard to hear or feel or understand when you're the person receiving the news that someone wants to end your marriage.
I once heard a phrase that said, people get divorced the same way they got married.
That's interesting. I often say to people, the same way you go in, you come out. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that with divorce. I usually refer to that with relationships, but that's really interesting. I mean, one thing that I will say is very often people get divorced for the same problems they were having before they even got married. I mean, it's not often that a new huge problem came up to be in the marriage. Usually it was brewing, or something was going on earlier in the relationship, and it was one of the partners thought either the other person would change, which I know as a therapist does not happen unless you do so much work, or that it would just fade out. Like, we'll be married for a long time and eventually they'll be able to open up to me and be more vulnerable. Like, just thinking that it would happen naturally. And so usually when you ask couples who've separated if what they're struggling with, even during the divorce, as you say, is similar to what they saw before, they would say yes.
So what kind of miscommunication patterns or conflict patterns for sure lead to divorce or breaking or falling apart of the marriage?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think that one of the biggest problems in all relationships, no matter what ends up happening, is this assumption that another person can read your mind. Just because you've lived with someone for a very long time, they do not become a mind reader. There is a lot of resentment from partners to partners for them not assuming or understanding either how much they've done or what they need. The biggest issue that I see is that people are not able to ask for what they need. And we don't, and we shut our needs down. And then we get angry at the other person for not being able to read our mind and give us what we need. And that's a completely unfair position to put somebody in. Now, with many women, because of living in the world where we aren't really encouraged to be all out there with what we want all the time, it's hard to even know sometimes what you need. But it's very frustrating for some partners, and especially it usually is men in my practice, to feel like they don't know what their partner wants. And they just get frustrated with them. So it's a real problem with not expressing needs on both ends.
Yes. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend who just broke up with her boyfriend. And then she was crying hysterically. And she said a phrase. She said, I was expecting that he would know what I needed in that moment, because he's saying that he's so sensitive and he loves me and all of that. And that led to this miscommunication and eventually a breakup, right? And when I asked, I said, why wouldn't you just simply ask? She says, I'm never going to ask. If he really loves me, he should know what I really need.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I hear that. He knows me so well. And I tell clients all the time, nobody can read your mind, but also everyone has a different need. He isn't not necessarily someone who's going to need someone to read how he feels or validate him all the time. The only way people know what we need is if we tell them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. First, I think we need, this comes up a lot on the podcast.
Yeah.
First, we need to know what it is that we need in the first place to identify our needs. Second, we need to learn how to directly and effectively communicate so that the other party, the person, can meet those needs if they can.
Absolutely. And it applies to parenting too. You need to know what you need from your child or how you're feeling in a moment when you're communicating with your child. Knowing what you need and where you are emotionally to taking your emotional temperature is the biggest gift you can give to another person that you are in relationship with.
I know.
Right? But if you spend a lifetime with somebody not expressing your need, then you start noticing, in my experience, I start noticing that they find someone else who can fill their need. So maybe they're on Facebook with an old boyfriend, or they're texting someone from work all the time. They find someone who it feels like can read their mind and give them everything they want. It's not true. They've just created this situation where it seems so starkly different from what's happening in their marriage.
Yes, so true. And there is a difference how women and men go through divorce, handle their feelings, and sort of bounce back after the event. Correct? Have you observed differences? Is there any research on this?
Yeah, I mean, the research shows what you would expect, which is that very often the men are not allowed to have a full range of emotions. They're expected to move on quickly. They're expected to accept whatever they can with custody and not ask for more. They're really put into a position of holding their feelings back and taking whatever comes to them. And the women are able to be seen as the victims, who are able to be seen as struggling, are able to have more of the emotional experience, which is not good for either of them, because really every person has both. They have an emotional part of them that's really sad and stuck, and they have a part of them that's ready to move on and feels empowered. But because of the dichotomy in our culture about what men and women are allowed to feel, it usually gets split in that way. Mm-hmm. Is that what you see too?
I do too. I do see that. I mean, I work with men. I do see that they do have feelings there, just like women, Exactly. They are emotional. Yes, they can cry. Sometimes my clients would say, I wish my ex would see how I opened up to you and my tears about losing my daughter and things like that. And I always wonder, we are in intimate relationships, romantic relationships, yet we never allow ourselves to be fully seen. We never almost allow ourselves to be deeply vulnerable, which of course can lead to a deeper connection.
Yes.
Because there are many fears. We have insecurities, right? I see that a lot from men. And you're right. Our culture is such that we raise boys to be tough and not feel their feelings and not be scared. And anger is encouraged. Then you are, a good man, tough man.
Yes.
And we encourage women sort of to have the big emotions. And when things fall apart, they dysregulate themselves completely. I've seen horrific footages of my clients who, let's say, a drop off or pickup, they videotape their ex going completely crazy. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
I wonder, why can certain people just...
Well, one thing that's really interesting that I like to tell my clients is that when we're in relationship with someone, if one person is holding an extreme experience or feeling of one way, we are naturally going to feel the opposite. So what really concerns me is when one person is so upset, the other person naturally is going to shut down. When actually in that situation of drop off, both people are probably more like in the middle, mildly upset. And so it's a very difficult place when someone you are interacting with, if your ex is very upset, because you then naturally go into this role of suppressing feelings, being logical, even though you might really be having a lot of feelings too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What I hear from people is, and this might be a myth, I don't know, that women are martyrs. They stay in marriages that are not happy. They sacrifice. They keep silent, and boom, one day it's no longer they can take it anymore, and that's the end of it. And I was wondering if you could talk about, from females' perspective, what's going on.
I mean, it's interesting because I think I could absolutely see how the men you work with would see that, given what I was saying before about how they don't express their needs. So it is not martyrdom. It is not noble to hold back your feelings from your partner. It is not a gift to anybody to not express what you need or how you feel. And I think that women need to take responsibility, and the women in my program, we spend time doing this, about how they enabled this situation to continue. What role, that's the crux of my program, which is, what did I do to keep this relationship going to this point? Let's say if I knew I was unhappy. So I think first of all, I don't think any one person in a relationship is the martyr or the victim or the aggressor, again, unless there is an active abuse going on. That both people have been in both roles throughout the relationship. And there might be more behaviors that, let's say, the woman has done, taking care of the kids, doing all the cooking, let's say not working is something that comes up. But those are choices she made. Whether they were conscious or unconscious. I talk to women about this all day long. When they start saying that they don't have any time for themselves, I say, have you asked your partner? Just the other day, I was talking to a client, especially with this, everyone living together right now in closed space. And she said, well, his work just seems more important. I said, well, you just go in there and say, from 7 to 10, I am unavailable. You have to take the baby. Not just in the same way he would say it. But again, and she thought, oh, I guess I couldn't. And it was very uncomfortable. And so we had to really piece apart and talk about what would be so uncomfortable about that. What feelings would come up if you really said, my time matters. And my experience with men who are amazing, they say, sure. They're just, again, going back to them reading your mind. He's not going to walk in and say, why don't you have from 7 to 10 to yourself? I mean, that's unrealistic.
I know that's completely unrealistic, but somehow women sacrifice, as you say, sublimate their needs like that, right? And then eventually they burn out one day. But if only they could speak. I'm wondering if you could speak about historic roots of this. Is this in our DNA to serve and be? I think it's related to safety. I think women have been historically seen as less than men. And the way that we had power was through serving and providing care. So we're going to continue to do what keeps us safe. And it's a very complicated idea because we were basically told in the 60s and 70s that you can do it all. You can work and you can care for people. But again, when you look around at can we work, you look at how many women are presidents of Fortune 500 companies, and they're very few, right? So we're still sent a very big message that to stay safe is really to take care, to nurture, and not necessarily to get ahead. And so it's ingrained in us to stay with what will keep us safe and what is expected of us. I think there's a fear that if I say, no, my work is important, that we will be unsafe. And again, it's completely based on historic trauma. It's not based on the present. Most of the men I know would say, great, yeah, sure, you should work. I'm talking about, and probably your clients too, they want 50% custody. They've been involved parents. These are not people who aren't interested in being with the kids, but the women are still afraid to ask for that help. They are. Yes, most of the time they are.
Yeah.
And hopefully one day this stereotype will break and women will be more truly empowered to speak from their needs, ask for what they need, communicate.
Yeah.
And
it's essentially, it's very important for us then to help our kids understand, especially our girls. Well, we can teach our boys something too, but what we want to start with is teaching our girls that they can express their needs, that they don't have to push away their feelings. That when they say, I was telling this example of, let's say my son says he wants Chinese and my daughter says she wants pizza, and then she'll quickly say, okay, fine, we'll have Chinese, no problem. This idea of pushing down what you want for another person. And then we also need to allow the boys and the men who are boys who are growing to be men to say, what do you want? And let me help you get that. So how can I be an advocate to helping you get what you need? So it starts really early, where we teach these behaviors that girls can express what they need and another person will respond appropriately.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. I think this can go like in so many directions. Let's say a parent who is, and a lot of parents may do this unconsciously. Let's say they may say, do this right now. Go clean your room right now. And the child would say, no, I don't want to clean my room now. I just want to, play with this, with this thing, or I'm playing with my friend, or I'm on FaceTime with my friend. No, I said you have to get up and you go do it now. I think parents also force things like that. And so we sort of disregard what the child's inner world, feelings, desires,
right,
moment moods are. And when they grow up, obviously, we shut that system so much that how are they going to be in tune with that system when they are a mother? So it's like this on autopilot. They just move through life like that.
Such a good point. And I think it's, I hear a lot of parents say to me, but, I need them to set the table, or I need them to do this thing they need to do. And you can say, I hear you that you're having such a good time and you'd like to continue FaceTime. Right now, the table needs to be set, and then you can get back to what you want to be doing. So it's just, hearing, again, going back to being heard and being seen, as opposed to being dismissed. And I know for me, I grew up with a lot of my feelings being dismissed.
When you grow up like that, it's so hard to all of a sudden develop that in your 20s and 30s when you are a married woman or when you are in a relationship. Of course, you had this lifelong learning and now you have to undo it. And oftentimes, sadly, but I love your framing of divorce. Divorce is the beginning of that finding yourself, being in tune with your needs and emotions, finally stepping into your authentic power and saying, this is enough. Now I am living for myself. I want to do what I want. All my life, I pleased everyone and I dismissed myself. And so,
yes. And I see that even if you're the person who wanted the divorce or the other person does, because you get to a point, kind of a rock bottom feeling where you think, okay, I can either continue doing what I'm doing and get the results I've been getting, or I can try something different. But because, as you said, sometimes it's unconscious that we don't express our needs. It doesn't become conscious until something really big like a divorce happens.
Yes, I'm seeing a friend go through divorce now, and she's handling it in a very empowered way. She says, I am not going to be the same person. I am developing myself. And I see she's a whole new person. She's in touch with her own needs. She says, with my new partner, she's searching for one. She's going to be more open and speak about her desires and never put herself not even on the list. Sometimes women, not even, never prioritize themselves.
Well, it's so beautiful to even hear her making a list of what she wants to do differently next time. That's the best part of it. You can redesign. You can live your life by design, not by default.
Yes, and we live longer, right?
Yes.
And if a marriage failed, that does not mean you failed in some way. And the next one may not work, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or with the other person or with the world. I think having that mindset is good, but how does someone get there, especially when there is that loss or trauma? Divorce can be traumatic.
Yeah.
I have someone who says, I'm not sure if I can ever find happiness anymore after my divorce.
Yep. Well, that's why I created the program I created online. I mean, you need to get help. I mean, sometimes when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you need someone else telling you, girl, dude, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Let me show you how to get there. And that's sometimes one of the hardest things for people, which is to admit that they need some guidance and some help. It's very hard to do this by yourself. You, as I said before, you're in a trauma, you're in a loss, you're processing a lot of pain. So being able to have the hope and the empowerment, sometimes you need to lean on someone else to help guide you. And then in my program, we also have a community of other people going through it who can continue to hold you up. And I'm blown away at the support that they can give to each other.
Let me ask you a question. Do you see a difference the way the younger generation handles divorce or goes through divorce proceedings as opposed to women? I'm not sure how old you are. I'm assuming my age, and you know, or older generation. Do you see a difference?
I do. I mean, I think one of the amazing things about the younger generation is that they were really brought up differently than I'm 43 in the way we were, where you still needed to stuff a lot of feelings. Like there's a lot more discussion about feelings and about where people want to be in a relationship. And so I think there is more open communication. So when the relationships end, they have the younger generation has more of an ability to communicate. Maybe you've seen this too, before mediation or before court. They just have an easier flow of talking about the relationship, kind of stepping back on a perch and looking down at it.
Also, perhaps they are more independent. They have jobs and careers. You know, I think the younger people think differently. Maybe.
Yeah, I think for women, it's still really hard because of what we were talking about before. Like I have a lot of women who are very successful at work, but feel like a failure because their relationship didn't work because they still think that that's their main currency. So I think it's still hard even if you're young. I just think they have better skills. They're more skillful at talking about the relationship from an abstract perspective instead of being in it in that heat of the emotion. Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah. So definitely, I think the work that you're doing, trying to get rid of the stigma is the first step, I feel like. So, so when people go through the process, they will not ostracize themselves for or feel like failure or put that pressure. I'm never going to get a divorce just like my parents or any other limiting beliefs or things of that nature.
Yes. And I will say, just because I know you talk about parenting on this podcast a lot, that research shows that it is worse for kids to stay in a situation where parents do not like each other, argue, or to have cold shoulders or don't express love than it is to be divorced. Research has consistently shown that. So often people say, I don't wait till the kids go to college. I don't want to hurt the kids. I just want to reframe. Not only are you hurting yourself by staying in something that's not comfortable for you, you're not helping your kids because one day they are going to be in a relationship too. And think for a moment how you would feel if they said, I'm in this relationship I'm not happy with, but I need to stay.
What's holding people back? They are in an abusive relationship, let's say. They are unhappy for sure. I know someone who's been in an abusive relationship for 10 years. And maybe they had wonderful times, not all the time is terrible. They had vacations. Certainly they have a child together. There were good moments and bad moments. But when I asked this person, he and she, both of them are contemplating divorce, but they haven't pulled the trigger yet because they say, we have this history. It's a shame to sort of, we lived so far together. We might as well continue. I am unhappy now. And who knows if I will ever find happiness with another person. What if the other person is worse than this marriage? This is familiar. And, this is my comfort zone. I might as well just stick with this. How to sort of do this mindset shift? What is it required for the person like that to let go and find a new chapter and begin sort of pull that trigger?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really difficult. I mean, you're talking about this as someone who's observing it, right? So you notice the patterns. It's easier for us sometimes on the perch to notice what's been going on than when you're actually in it. Staying in something is an act. It is a decision. Just like not being sure if you're staying is also a decision. So I think that when we look at our friends who are in that ambivalent stage, for us, it's best to see that as they've decided not to stay. They've decided to stay, even though they're talking about leaving. Because I think it can be very murky for them and for us. Are they in or are they out? And so in some ways, like, where are your feet? If you're still in the house, you're deciding to stay. And sometimes when I say that to people, that helps them kind of snap out of the mindset and say, oh, no, I'm not in this marriage. And I say, well, you are. This is where you go to sleep. This is where you put your money. This is where your kids are. So sometimes it helps to just kind of point out that ambivalence, that it's actually a stance, because a lot of people are more comfortable being in that middle stage for a long, long time. I mean, 10, 20, 30 years. Also, I think what's probably at play is some sort of old experience or old trauma that you can't leave a situation, or you're not good enough to ask for what you need. Something from the past must be getting them stuck. So I would recommend in that situation, certainly to talk to a therapist. There's also a really interesting kind of work now that I just interviewed someone on my podcast about. It's called discernment therapy. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a protocol where people go into therapy. It's a specific kind of couples therapy that you get trained in to decide if they want to leave or stay. It's usually when one person isn't sure and the other person would like to end it. And they do some really good work on discerning whether it's time to stay or whether it's time to go. So that's another piece. I'm saying this, but you need extra help. If you and your partner are for 10 years unsure of what to do, you need someone else. That's number one. And what I said earlier, just so you know, it's not that you haven't decided. You have decided. You're staying. And sometimes just knowing that is important.
Yeah, I love that.
Makes sense?
Yes, yeah. I love your questioning here. That reminds me, I had a client who I asked, again, it was a similar situation. And I asked him, I said, well, I'm giving you a homework assignment, write down what will you miss about this person if you were to divorce, or about this relationship. And, the next time when he came to the class, he said, I'm sad. It's sad, but nothing. And I think I am done. You opened my eyes. I think just that one exercise helped him sort of solidify what was in front of him for a long time.
Yes. And it can be so important because even though there's something we've been in or marinating in, we can be blind to it sometimes. And that's what's so powerful about mediation, about coaching, about therapy, is to have another person there to reflect that.
True. I also want to touch upon the moving on process for both women and men. Let's talk about women, what it looks like. Have you observed patterns of moving on? Let's say, the empowered, more growth mindset oriented type of woman, or a category of women, or people like that podcast guest's ex who after 10 years was still brewing in a lot of emotion. Have you observed patterns in the moving on process, and what it means to move on anyways?
Yes. Such an important question. I really think that if you're someone who is willing to open your heart to the possibility that we're all human and that we both have made mistakes and we've both done beautiful things in the relationship, and that through discomfort, something will come of it, even if it's not glorious, even if you can't believe at that moment that it's going to be glorious and wonderful. I think if you have the ability to believe that beauty can come from pain, that there's no lotus flower without mud, then you can begin to take small steps towards having a life that you want. Again, one step forward, two step back. So it's not an easy road. But if you are someone who really, there's a great saying, would you rather be right or happy? If you'd rather be right, you'll probably have a hard time moving on. Because you won't ever be told you're right. I mean, you'll be told, but you're right by your friends. But I tell a story in my program and in my book about waiting for years for my ex-husband to apologize to me for essentially leaving and me having to take care of two very young kids, years. And then I had done some work in therapy and really did a letting go ritual. I just really let go of the fact that he was just never going to say it. And I could be proud of how I took care of the kids, that I was the one who said, great job, that I was really saying it to myself. And wouldn't you know, a month later, he said it to me and it was like I didn't even need it because I had already done the work. And so I got it, but I didn't need it. So I think that's it. I think it's this deeply needing to be right is going to keep you so stuck, just like that. Like that's why that woman called you, because it was more important for her to be right than to be happy.
Oh, so powerful. You are, yeah. You pose this question, how did I end up here? Turning the focus on the person as opposed to, the other party. I would love for you to elaborate a little bit.
Sure. On my experience of this or how I do that with clients?
If you're open to speak about your experience, I would love that.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to. So I was married to an active alcoholic and I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old. And I stayed with him. He was an alcoholic throughout our relationship. So I'm an example of, someone who stayed, who thought that I'm a therapist, for God's sakes. I could find the right person for him and get him to be sober. And there were moments when he was sober. So there were periods of time. And that can be another reason why people stay a long time. We talk about that as like slot machine love, like this feeling of that's why people use slot machines, because once in a while you win. So once in a while he was sober. So I stayed for those moments of that sobriety. And when I finally decided to kick him out, I had so many stories of terrible things that he had done. I had so many stories. And I thought to myself, I could just imagine myself telling these stories and getting a lot of positive feedback from people around me. People like, sad stories, but that it would move me nowhere. I had this image of being on a hamster wheel, that it would just keep me in this space of anger and resentment. And I had this moment where I thought to myself, you know what? He might have done all these things, but I stayed and I was attracted to someone who I knew had these problems. What is it about me? How did I get here? Because I know that if I didn't look at that, I'm going to get there again. I, thought of all the other people I had dated and I thought, oof, he was one person in a long pattern. And the only person that I can change is myself. So no matter how many stories I told about him, no matter how many people felt sorry for me, nothing was changing in my life. I needed to figure out how I got here and how I could make sure it wouldn't happen again.
Wow, that's truly very moving. So I would love to know then about your program and how you move people through the program and what are the benefits and what's the focus of the program? And
absolutely.
The goal of it.
Yeah. So I created this program because when that happened to me, when I decided I was going to focus on myself, I started Googling everywhere to find a program and I couldn't find anything. I really couldn't find a comprehensive program to help me move through my divorce, process why I had been there, what it felt like for me, what I needed to move through. I couldn't find that. I had therapy, but I knew I wanted more. I wanted to go deeper. So that's why I created this program. I created the Divorce Course, which is a 14-session video online course, which is essentially top-notch psychotherapy in a comprehensive package where I help people work through all the different parts of divorce, letting go of resentment, letting go of the stigma, issues of dating again, issues of processing your loss, co-parenting. I really walk you through all of the steps to heal so that you can feel more confident, more optimistic, and really thrive in the next chapter. And I've had so many people go through this and have really gotten so much out of it, and they've wanted even more. So then I added another part where after you do the divorce course, you can come into a membership program where you have other people who are divorced, where you get every month you get lectures by different experts. You're going to be one of the amazing experts that people get to hear from. And most importantly, get support, because divorce can be very isolating. Many of the people that I've spoken to move somewhere for their partner and then divorce, and the kids' lives are there, so they have to stay. So I wanted to help provide both treatment, support, really looking at how you can heal yourself. It's a recovery program. I think of it like if you were to break your arm, first you stabilize your arm, then you figure out what's wrong with it, and then you do rehab. And that's the same thing that we do in the program. And the added piece of the community just makes you feel more vibrant and thrive even more.
Yes. And also you can see other people's experiences and know that you're not alone. And some people have it better or worse. And you sort of gauge your own experience and feel all right.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Recently, during this, the pandemic, when I've been circling with the women in my program and men who are divorced, it's been so fascinating because there's a specific issue that people who are divorced are dealing with right now. And so while lots of people are talking about how hard it is to shelter in place, there's a lot of specific issues related to co-parenting. Like, do you let your kids go back and forth right now? That's a really hard decision to make. I have 2 clients whose exes had to move in with them because of financial issues. So there's specific issues that come up for people who are divorced that your other friends might not understand. So to have other people who get it is so powerful. They want calls like 3 times a week. They love it so much.
I know. I have clients who do co-parent, and some are completely against sending the children back and forth, and some are, hell yeah, take him because I need a break. You know, you see,
right.
You see different patterns. It's so interesting. There is no right or wrong, of course. I don't know. What's your suggestion
for what to do with co-parenting right now?
Yes.
It's very difficult. It's very challenging. I mean, it really, I've been telling people that it depends really on if you can have an agreement, kind of like a divorce agreement. You know, the kids will go back and forth, but we will not expose ourselves to other people. But that gets difficult when one partner has a boyfriend and that boyfriend or girlfriend has kids and they're going out. You know, you really have to, it's difficult because you might not have the best relationship with your ex. And this is a very difficult time to be compromising, but it's really hard. So I would say if you can be transparent and have good communication, then going back and forth is okay. I have a client who really couldn't do that, and she's having the kids full time, and the dad will get them, more in the summer. They'll figure that out, but he's very angry about it. So there's going to be a lot of repercussions from any decision.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, no family, no relationship, no co-parenting relationship is alike. And, if it was an abusive relationship and now you sort of have to communicate. Yeah. If you had no communication, now you have to communicate. And maybe the communication was the problem to begin with. That's why you are in this situation. And
exactly.
Right?
Right. It's like, I'm sure when you mediate with clients, like you don't have a clause for a pandemic, right? Like some people I work with, they go strictly by their agreement because they can't have any contact. And then something like this happens, something spontaneous. I mean, it happens, that you can't predict everything, but it's very difficult. And you have to remember that everyone is going through a global trauma right now. So none of us are in a great position to make amazing decisions. I don't know about people who are listening to your podcast, but there is so many similarities between what we're going through as far as this global pandemic and the trauma, I think, to what happens when you first get divorced. Like your life gets rocked. You don't know which way is up. You have so many decisions to make. Your kids are emotional. It feels very similar to me.
Yeah. It's as I say, it's like an earth-shattering experience because your reality is gone, the loss is gone, your love, your marriage, your family, the routines have changed, financial issues. You have to sell the house, you have to attend to your own emotions and needs, and you have the kids, and you have to deal with lawyers, and it's so many layers. I feel like it's impossible to have a stress-free divorce.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I offer a guide into how to have a stress-free divorce, and what I suggest is how to keep your nervous system at ease, because there will be stress, but how do you keep yourself as emotionally regulated as you can? Same thing as now. That's all we can do from moment to moment. Do the best we can to stay emotionally regulated.
Yes, true. It's true when it comes to parenting. It's true.
Yes,
in a lot of relationships.
Yeah, and then to just forgive yourself over and over and over.
Oh God.
Do you need that reminder?
Yes, I do. In terms of parenting.
Yeah, I could talk to you forever.
I know. I love the little sentences, expressions you say. It's like, wow, it's so powerful. The way you say it, it's like, it just makes complete sense. Is there anything you would like me to ask? Is there anything you would like the listener to know?
I mean, I guess one thing I just want to make sure people know is that I truly believe that everyone is doing the best they can in the present moment. And that applies to you and to the person that you're divorcing, that giving yourself and the other person space to be perfectly imperfect will reduce your anxiety and stress a lot. There is no perfect divorce. There is no perfect co-parenting. Throw that out the window. You're doing the best you can. And I bet you're doing so much better than you think you are.
Elizabeth, where can the listener find you online and connect with you? And what amazing offerings do you have for the listener? Give me everything.
Yeah, so people can find me at drelizabethcohen.com. And I have some really fun, exciting, free material to give out because I love giving free material. So I have a stress-free divorce guide that I mentioned that I'll give you the link for that. And I just am opening a 14-day step-by-step guide to making the best decisions you need to make during your divorce. Making decisions can be one of the hardest things during a divorce, and you have so many to make. So this is a clear guide in how to feel totally confident in making decisions.
How about social media?
You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm the Divorce Doctor, and I post quite often, and I like to post information about divorce and also about general mental health issues. If you happen to be in the New York City area, I do have a private practice. I'd be happy to talk with people about that as well. You can find out all that information on my website.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I may have to have you back again to talk about the different aspect of this topic.
I hope you do.
We will hear from the listener what they want to learn more.
Great.
And I am wishing you, health and safety. Stay well during this difficult, uncertain time. And we'll connect again, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Absolutely. My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.